Mark 16, 9 through 20, I think we're pretty solid there. But the story of the woman caught in adultery. So can you share us some of your thinking surrounding that passage?
I think the external, in my opinion, the external evidence is not nearly as clear cut as I would like it to be at all. I do think that the scales tip a little bit on the inclusion side of it. And at our conference, we had 5 speakers, all of them legitimate textual scholars. Three of them argued for the inauthenticity, and 2 of them argued for the authenticity. But here's the deal: all of them argue that passage should be taught and preached. I have a little bit of a problem with that.
Sure.
So, for example, on the last 12 verses of Mark, when Peter, I think it's Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, says basically we could still teach and preach those just as we would the apocrypha. I don't know, when's the last time you heard a sermon from the apocrypha?
I have not.
Have you preached a sermon from the apocrypha? I haven't used Esdras, or I haven't used Second Maccabees in a long time.
I've mentioned the apocrypha before, but I've never preached from them. Yeah.
I think that I don't think you can have a canon within a canon, or we shouldn't have a canon. Some scriptures more scripture than others.
Right.
Again, I would say just get rid of it. Reduce it to a footnote, stick it as an appendix. Well, it's already at the back of Mark's gospel anyway. Just separate.
That's right.
Completely.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to deal with handling serpents or drinking. You don't have to deal with that.
But again, it comes down to the same thing with the woman caught in adultery as along in the Mark, is if you actually remove that. Now, I think Tyndale House, did they remove that, the THG&T?
I don't remember.
I can't remember. I think, or maybe it was along in the Mark. They actually took it out.
One of them. Maybe the SBL did it. With Michael Hope. So,
but I mean, it's the same thing, right? Is if you take 753 to 811 out of John, then people aren't going to buy it. They're going to see it as a defective Bible, and there's going to be outrage, and people won't buy it. And so, yeah, it's an interesting. It's almost like preservation is occurring as we speak, right? Like, even though some scholars would say it's not scripture, there's almost
you have a lot of
Western
witness attestation for it, just like you do in 1 John 5:7, right?
Yeah,
that's what you were talking about. You've got strong Latin,
yes,
attestation.
Yeah,
but though Greek is very poor, I don't think you can do that. I think the Latin can be very, very helpful. However, if you have strong Greek attestation, as you do in John 7:53 to 11, and then of course the Itala. We know that the Itala pushes that reading back into the 2nd century. So we know that reading is equally early, even though the earliest physical document maybe we could get our hands on is much, much later. By the way, in Gordon Fee's wonderful book, he has an excursus on 1 Corinthians 14, 34, and 35.
Yes.
Because as an egalitarian, he doesn't like those verses. So he's going to see those as an interpolation. But here's one of his arguments. Did you know in the Western text, just the Western text, those verses are taken out of that context and added at the end of the chapter after verse 40. So he says that gives me the grounds. Now here's what he's saying very clearly. He says, don't reject it just because it's in the Western text. The Western text, this was the text that was read in the early Latin church, even before the Vulgate came along.
Right.
This was their Bible.
Yes.
That pushes the reading, because we know the Itala original. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Dwayne, but I think the earliest physical copy of the Itala, or the Old Latin we have, is like 6th century. I don't really remember, but it's not 2nd.
No.
But that doesn't mean that the Itala originated in the 5th or 6th century.
Right.
The Itala the Latin New Testament originated at the end of the 1st, early 2nd century. We know that. So going back to, let's say I had a reading that is supported in the Gospels by Codex Bezae, by the Old Latin, by the Vulgate, by Jerome, by Irenaeus, by Tertullian, by Augustine. Could I not fairly say that is basically a Western reading? Okay. And then if I combine that with Alexandrinus, the lectionaries, 100 million other minuscule manuscripts, I could probably say I have the Byzantine reading there. And if I have all of B and P45, and I have C and L and 33, and the Coptic, the Sahidic, and the Baharic, I could probably say that's an Alexandrian reading. So I have a very high view of the Western text. And incidentally, on my blog the other day, I introduced my readers to a translation they probably never heard of, but there's an actual translation in English that is based on the Vulgate. So you have 3 options in terms of Bible translations. You have the NKJV, you have the ESV. We know which text types they support, and then we have the Douay-Rheims, which is based on the Vulgate. Yeah. And that you could also refer to the New American Bible or the RSV Catholic Edition. And
Yeah.
people are always asking me, well, which should I use? Should I use the Douay-Rheims? Should I use the NAB? Should I use the ESV,
Right.
the CSB? Should I use the NKJV, the KJV? And my answer is all of them. Use all of them or any of them together.
Right.
That's what I do every morning before I do anything else. I have about an hour and a half in the Bible. Usually in the New Testament, I say it to my shame.
Yeah, yeah.
I am reading all the English translations. I'm reading the Spanish, the German, the French, the Italian, even my mother tongue Hawaiian Pidgin. I'm using that one too.
Nice.
I've got the Vulgate. I'm reading it in the Hebrew. I have 3 Hebrew New Testaments. I'm just reading it in all. And people say, well, which Greek New Testament should I use? The Robertson Pierpoint or the United Bible Societies? And the answer is yes.
Gotcha.
And here's the deal. Here's what, Dwayne, if I could, here's the bottom line for me. Here's what we need to be teaching our people. 2 things. Number one, we have not lost a word of the New Testament. It's either printed above the line or below the line in my Greek New Testament, or it's printed in the text or in the footnote of my NRSV or my NKJV or my CSB. We have not lost a word of it. And therefore, we never, ever, in my opinion, have to resort to conjectural emendation in the New Testament. And I once wrote years ago in Novum Testamentum, I felt led to publish an article because at that time, it was a trend to produce conjectural emendations in the Gospel of Matthew. I found 17 of them in French, German, Spanish, Italian, English. And I said, okay, let me look at these 17 and see if there's a necessity for any one of them. None of them was necessary. Not one of them was necessary. You could explain the text through careful exegesis on the basis of the existing documents without having to resort. But it was a fad at that time. Hopefully it's not as faddish today, but I don't think we ever have to do that.
I think there's 3 in the ECM.
What was that?
I think there's 3 in the ECM.
I don't think they're necessary. Here's the other thing. We need to teach, we have 101% of the New Testament because we have 99%, because there's only 2,000, in my opinion, 2,000 significant major textual variants. Everything agrees about 99% of the time. Where they disagree, the reading is either going to be found. Here's how I was taught to read my New Testament in Greek. Okay? Whatever is printed above the line is original, and you don't even have to deal with the bottom. That's what I was taught in seminary. This is UBS 3rd corrected edition. In other words, follow the Alexandria. Others come along and say, no, this is the way you need to read your Greek New Testament. Right? Now the Byzantine is on the top. I say to people, in the end, it doesn't matter because we haven't lost a word. But here's the deal. Here's the second thing we need to do, Dwayne, and this is what your website is doing so beautifully. You're educating your audience. Don't be intimidated by textual criticism. Don't be afraid of textual criticism. In some places, we don't know. Dwayne Green has an opinion. Maurice Robinson has an opinion. Peter Gurry has an opinion. Dave Black has an opinion. Make up your own mind. You look at the evidence for yourself. Romans 14 says, let every person be convinced in his or her own mind. And you know what I've discovered as I did this in a mega church in North Carolina about a month and a half ago. I had a whole Saturday conference on the text. Can we trust the New Testament? It was packed. The whole sanctuary was packed. 350 people. It's like they're hungry. They're eager. They can handle this. Teach them, inform them. And the one thing I love about your website, it's not an apologetics website. You're not trying to defend your position, even though you are a proponent of Byzantine priority. It's wonderful to see.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Black. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the channel. I'm hoping maybe we can do this again sometime.
I'd love it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm sure as I dive in and discover more, something might come up and be like, that seems like a really good question for Dr. Black.
Anytime. Okay, love you. Appreciate you. Talk to you later.
All right, thanks, brother. Anyway, brothers and sisters, until next time, we'll see you around.